Welcome to First Responder Financial Freedom Podcast. We talk to first responders all over the nation who are investing and working on businesses outside of their first responder jobs. Our goal is to motivate and educate each other and help provide a better financial understanding for a better future. Now here are your hosts, Mike Webb, Tyler Thrush, and Aaron Foster.
All right, First Responder Financial Freedom. Today, Mike gets held over for his fire department. He's working a couple extra hours over there. So it's Tyler, me, Aaron, and Dylan Burnett. Dylan Burnett comes to us from the Arizona state, but he invests over in the New Jersey state, long distance where he's from. So Dylan, I got a couple pen notes on the side of this thing in the private chat. So give me your 15-second spiel for the elevator pitch of what you do and where you're coming from.
No, 100%. Hey, appreciate you guys having me on there. The show's pretty great. Love what you're doing here. I was in New Jersey, operating in New Jersey, and then we said, screw it, we're heading to Arizona after everything got locked down, and then we came here a bunch, and the weather was great. So now I am basically just flipping, wholesaling, and enjoy the rental game as well. So do everything virtually. Been at it about five years or so. And yeah, in a nutshell, that's pretty much it.
So in 5 years, you're doing about 40 houses a year, wholesale and flip, right?
Yep.
Do you prefer one over the other?
It depends on the house. I go back and forth on this daily. Is like, do we flip it? Do we wholesale it? It really depends on what we're doing. I'm probably a little heavier on the wholesale than I am flipping, but still flipping is kind of bread and butter where I'm at.
And let's not ignore the rentals. You've got 38 rentals now, right?
38, yeah. We're actually under contract now in due diligence to buy another 39. So that'll be a big uptick.
Oh, you're adding 39. You're not going to 39. You're adding an additional 39 units.
That's it. Yep, adding an additional 39 units.
So you'll be right around 77 units you'll have?
Yep, right about there.
All right, so I don't want to get too far ahead. So Tyler, you and Dylan were in Investor Fuel, right? The mastermind, is that right?
Yeah, so we met in Mastermind I don't even know how many years ago, but a few years ago. And then I've actually been a lender for him too on a few of his deals and stayed in touch. It's interesting to see because I know when you started, you had a partner, right?
Yep.
And then you went. It's interesting to see Dylan because I've seen like all the different things that he's done, and he's probably seen the same things. But like I know he was big into texting for a while, and then he had multiple people on his team, and all of these things. So yeah, we've known each other. I want to say 4 or 5 years. I'm not sure if that's correct or not. Sounds about right. Yeah. Right. So you mentioned a couple things. So we'll just kind of start. You mentioned you prefer wholesale to flip. Is that because of the way the market is right now? Or is it just as you progress in your career, you realize that you're more willing to wholesale a house versus get involved in a flip?
Yeah, I mean, being so far away, right? A couple thousand miles, 3-hour time difference. It can get a little bit hectic when people are calling you at 5 a.m. And, it's 8 a.m. there. They're dealing with whatever and then managing people. So the wholesale model just is simpler. Like, it just closes and we're done. I don't have to deal with it anymore. Whereas that I've got 30, 60 days of dealing with BS. But I do have a partner flipping, and he does, like, if I don't do it myself, if we take it on, we did 13 the last 2 years each. So he manages everything. I find the deals, I bring them, and then he manages construction, and then I deal with the sales side of it. But I think where people go wrong with partnerships a lot is like when we first started this, I said, all right, I went to his house, I got a whiteboard and I said, here's what we're going to do. This is my job. This is your job. And then this is my job. Like, you deal with everything in the middle, and then I'll deal with everything with finding and then selling. And then that's it. So I tried to set clear expectations. And so far that partnership's working good. That's the second partner I've had. The first partner, still a friend of mine, just didn't work out. Life happens. And, we kind of shut that down, and I went on my own from there.
Okay. And so you said something too, real quick. You're not a partner in the business with him. It's a deal by deal basis, force flip specifically.
Yes. That's correct. Yep.
Awesome. I think that's a good way to do it. I don't know how Aaron feels, but like for me, the whole overarching partner thing is a lot more to unwind if something does go wrong. But if you're doing deal by deal basis, it's like, hey, this one works out, this one works out. And like you said, it's worked out up to this point. Let's say one doesn't work out down the road. It's not like you have to unwind your whole business. It's like, hey, I'm going to do a couple of these on my own from now on, or something to that effect.
I agree. Let me ask you a question. I don't want to step too far back, but when you guys were Investor Fuel together, were you doing investing before Investor Fuel?
Attempting to. I was so before that so to take it all the way back 2014, I got out of college and my one of my teachers, I walked in to his office and he had his like stock count up. I had like $3 million in there. And I was like, how did you do that? And then he told me he had like 30 some properties he owned, introduced me to somebody's network. I started working for a wholesaler in Philly, literally just walking the streets of Philly, putting notes on people's doors in the hood. So it's just like, I'd be out there at 8 a.m. before everything got crazy. And after that, I was like, I'm going to wholesale on my own. So I sent out mailers and I got 0 deals, all while delivering pizza. So I wasn't making any money. So then I was a realtor for a number of years. I fell into that trap. I think I learned a lot there, but now someone said it in the Rio one time, like I'm a recovering realtor. And I was like, that's a good explanation there. So was doing that. And then I was like, I think I did like 37 deals and like after taxes, I made like 50 grand. And I was like, I can't do this. This is 80 hours a week and me waking up at 2 a.m. forgetting things. After that, I was like, I'm going to focus on trying to get deals and like slowly transition out. And first wholesale deal we did was from code enforcement. I knew the lady. She's like, that lady wants to sell the house. I got it for $8. I sold it for like $9,600. So I was like, I made $1,600. And I was like, oh, it works. And then the next deal I did, driving for dollars, I looked around for the houses and I saw one. I was selling the house across the street to somebody. And I was like, I'm going to try and buy that house, and ended up making like $31,000 on it, $31,500. So then I was like, wow, this is so much better than making a $6,000 commission. And then $1,500 goes to the broker, $1,500 goes away to taxes. I make $3 grand. It takes me 45 days. So from there, it's kind of, I just pushed myself into investing mainly. And yeah, sorry, I meant to say at the beginning, kind of fell off track there, but that's kind of the story behind, kind of where I'm at today.
So your light bulb moment was like when you were doing those properties and then you bought the house across the street and you're like, you know what, I'll make more off of these 2 deals than I will as a realtor with less headache working 80 hours a week. Is that your light bulb 100%. Moment?
Yeah, like I sold the house to somebody I knew. I made like 2.5% of like 190. So whatever that was. And when I went after that, I was like, dude, I'm making way more money doing that. Takes me forever to do that as a realtor. So that kind of flipped the switch for me.
I think it's interesting too, because at the start, like same thing, right? Like, yeah, you do the agent thing, and then you realize, oh, I don't really want to do this. I want to become an investor because the spread is better. Now, like when I look at stuff now, I'm always like tempted to be like, well, I don't personally want to be an agent for a lot of my deals, but I wouldn't mind having an agent under my license right now to do a lot of that. And I think of people like Chad and Wendy. We've had Chad on the show before. Stinson, we've had Stinson on the show, and Daniela is an agent. I think it's a good ancillary business for somebody who is investing if you don't necessarily want to do it, right? Like I look at that, I'm like, dude, the amount of deals that Stinson and Chad can funnel to their wives, and that they already have a great realtor business on their own. And it's just like an ancillary business to bring more money in. Have you thought about doing that, or do you still list your own properties? Is that still a revenue source?
A very small one. I still have my license because I'm not going to get rid of it. But yeah. So we can get referral fees out of it, and I probably don't push as hard as I should for those. Probably do 7 to 10 deals a year on the side, just from people knowing I'm in real estate. So
okay,
with those, I know a lot of those guys are doing from leads, and they're just converted them over to listings or whatever.
Yes,
and definitely a great thing to do. I just squirrel. I was just distracted.
Yep.
I was just Googling like what states is it legal or illegal to wholesale in, because Maryland just passed a bill where in order to wholesale, you have to have a real estate license now. Well, October of this year. So I'm curious to see how much it affects the real estate market, especially the off market deals here in Maryland. Have you guys looked into any kind of that obstacles? 'Cause I know between the two of you invest in 4 different states, so you guys have that kind of obstacle ahead of you.
Well, I'll let Dylan answer first, but go ahead.
I haven't had any issues with it at all. Even the people like, I think in Philly, I used to do stuff in Philly. I think Philly has a wholesale license, but I don't know enough about that. But I haven't, even though they have that, I still know people that don't have it and do it. So I think there's still workarounds around it, but I don't know what you see, Tyler.
Well, I was going to say, I think it poses a problem for people who are only trying to assign, right? Because I think that's what they're trying to attack is people
Yeah.
who are solely assigning. And I've never honestly, like, I always think you have so much more control. And this is something that I learned in Investor Fuel. Like, you have so much more control when you take the deal down. Like, I know a lot of people don't want to tie up the money, but for me, especially if your money's cheap enough and you're not getting charged a ton of points, I would much rather own that deal first, take a breath and be like, okay, now what do I want to do with this? Do I want to flip it? Do I want to wholesale it? Do I want to keep it as a rental? And then you have a lot more power. And I think, nobody's going to ever be able to, I hope not, that'd be really crazy if they could, but no state's going to be able to tell me that I can't buy a property, hold it, and then do whatever I want with it afterwards. The assigning thing, I'm honestly not against, because it thins the herd a little bit. And it's like, okay, now people who have money or who have access to private lending, that thins the herd a lot, and it makes it more responsible. The thing that I get irritated with and I see lately is we'll be talking to sellers, right? And, oh, your price is ridiculous that I offer them. I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. It is what it is. Good luck to you. I feel confident in my numbers. And then I see that same person reach out like, oh, hey, they backed out on me. I'm like, well, what do you mean they backed out on you? Why don't they just take the property down? Oh, they said they couldn't do it. Knowing full well I saw them try to list, or the wholesalers trying to sell the property in Facebook groups and email blasts that I'm a part of for a price that was it was higher than what I was offering. It just cracks me up. It's like they had no idea, or they couldn't do it, and they're trying to sell it to me. I had some dude blow my phone up like 15 times the other day trying to sell me this property. Finally, I answered. I'm like, man, the reason I'm not calling you back is I've already seen it in emails. I've seen it in text messages. Your price is way too high. And he's like, well, I'm just trying to get rid of it before my contract expires. I'm like, well, that's not really how you take stuff down, in my opinion. Like, you should have known that prior to. So to answer your question, Aaron, I think it's a good thing. I never had to deal with it because I always take it down on my own because I want to control the deal. So I don't know. I mean, if Dylan feels the same way, I just feel like it's so much more powerful. And I didn't really think about it until Mike Hambright told me, why don't you take it down and then you can control all of your options.
That's a good way to put it. I had a sit down with one of the guys at work the other day. We've been on the job. We're in 2 different classes, but we get the same amount of time on the job. And we were talking about real estate, and he's big into it as well. And he said that he got a brokerage, and he does wholesaling, and he does buy and holds. So if he gets in your front door, he's like, hey, if you want to wholesale it, like here's the process for that. I'll be happy to do that. But if you want to list it, I'll be your listing agent, and I'll get a commission off of it. And he also got his home inspections license. So he's like, I'll inspect the house for you or the next house you buy with this money. I'm like, man, you're basically just hitting it from all angles. And I love that. Like, it's just multifaceted. So that's the wholesaling thing. I like the fact that we can have that discussion on here because it is a tool in the toolbox. And a lot of people don't understand that they're just getting in front of a buyer, saying, hey, I'll buy it for this price, getting under contract, and then you're selling that contract to the next person under market value, so they have a house they want to live in. And there's obviously subject to and the wraps and everything, which a lot of the guys we know are into as well. Are you strictly like wholesale, buy and hold? Do you do wraps? Do you do subject twos, Dylan?
I have done subject twos. I've done seller financing. To me, it's shiny object syndrome. Like, I'm like, let me just focus on like finding a really good deal, and then I'm going to either A, wholesale it, or B, flip it. And then the only way we're keeping rentals is if it's multifamily. So, 2 units, we've got a 12 unit. That's in a nutshell what it is. I mean, wholesaling, like kind of back to what Tyler was saying, is one of the business models is lock everything up if it's under what it seems like it's worth, try and sell it, and then cancel it. And that's one of the business models. And a lot of the guys we've been in groups, Tyler, where that's half their business. They're canceling half the contracts because they can't sell them. I don't really like that model personally, but I probably cancel 5 deals a year because I locked them up too high. And it's like, within a day or two, like, hey, everybody hates this deal. I'll just cancel it immediately.
Yeah.
So that's
stuff happens,
to me the most
ethical
sure. way to do it.
Yeah. I would say for sure stuff happens. And like to walk it back a little bit, assigning's fine too if you have the means to close on it, if you can't assign it. But at the same time, you can't put yourself in a terrible position just to close a deal. I mean, sometimes, like you said, sometimes the value gets thrown off. There's something unexpected. There's a bunch of stuff because that happens in retail transactions all the time, right? Buyers lock up. So people who say like, oh, well, you have to lock up or close every single one you lock up. Well, that's not realistic in the retail model. But my point was exactly what you just hit on, and you said it better than I did. Your business model should not be to lock stuff up with a 50-50 chance of canceling it or renegotiating for a lower price. Because you're taking a person who's already in a crappy situation, which is most likely why they called or texted or emailed us, and you're putting them now in a worse spot.
100%. The renegotiation model is one that I think a lot of people are doing. I can't sleep at night with that, and I know a lot of the people that do it. They're like, oh, it makes so much money, and I'm like, I still can't sleep at night.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that moral compass, man.
That's it.
So Dylan, you went from like putting Post-it notes on doors to door knocking in Philly to sending out letters. Like, what are you doing now for marketing?
Yeah, for sure. It changes a lot. I think there's been a large change over the last 2 years. Like I was heavy SMS, like text blast marketing. We text, 3 or 4 years ago, I was using a Roar, which is just like a machine gun style of text message blasting. You don't even have to do anything. It just sends them out. And there's so many regulations. I mean, we were doing a lot more deals like that. Now with all the regulation, I think it's slowed down a lot. Last year I had 24 contracts from texting alone. This year I have 1. So it's definitely decreased a lot. So a lot of direct mail, probably 30,000 postcards a month sending out, and internet advertising. Those are basically the 3 main lead sources. So pay-per-click, texting, and I'm still doing SMS because I have virtual assistants that handle all of it, and I don't want to let them go just because I'm having a bad beginning of a year.
Keep them in your pocket. So the I'm guessing ringless voicemail and text messages. I haven't really paid attention to the regulations on that. Like, what changed?
I haven't done ringless voicemail in a couple of years. But texting, it's like I can't use the word sell. I can't use the word interested. I can't be like out of the blue. There's like 40,000 words you can't use. So you have to send some cryptic message of like, hey, do you want to let this place go? And they're like, what? So it's changed. We're still getting deals from it. It's just not as straightforward as it was before when I was like, hey, would you like to sell your property for cash at 123 Banana Street? And then they'd be like, yes or no. And it'd be a much easier conversation.
Yeah.
Dude, I'll never forget. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to ask you if you do the same thing or like what you're doing for marketing now. But you go.
So I'm doing 100%. I take that back. I'm doing 50-50. I'm doing direct mail with Todd Swaggerty. And then I'm doing PPC and Facebook that I'm managing on my own. So we do a lot of PPC and then we retarget on Facebook. But when Dylan said that, I will never forget when we were at Fuel and SMS text messaging, the whole marketing thing came out. It was like people's eyeballs were this big and it was like go time, dude. And I don't know how many text messages were sent out of that mastermind, but it had to be millions, dude, because it was like, do you remember that? It was like, that's all everybody talked about. And it was cool. And I was like, oh, this makes sense. But for me, it was always like, I don't understand how it's sustainable because you're going to ramp this up, burn through so much data, and then it's done. So it's interesting. I still think texting is super powerful for follow-up, for maybe warm lead stuff like that. But like Dylan said, with the regulations changing, I think it's harder to do. I still think it's possible. I still like direct mail as a tried and true method. I mean, it's not very sexy. It's expensive. And I think a lot of people fall in and out of love with it. So you said you're sending out 30,000 postcards a month, Dylan?
I think I just ramped it up as of like last week. I mean, this year alone, I've gotten 10 deals from direct mail already. The response rate. So when it comes to direct mail, just for people who don't know, you send out a bunch of mail, whether it's postcards or letters, you get a certain percentage back of a response rate. And that could be an FU, take me off your list, or I want to sell my house. So back in 2018, when I was doing a lot, I was getting like a 1% response rate, which is really good. So if I send out 10,000, I get about 100 calls. And this year I'm at like 0.16% to 0.21%. So it's just a crazy on how many less calls we're getting. But the deals are still there, so it still makes sense. But it's just a crazy how many less calls we're getting. And I'm wondering if that's kind of like, hey, no one even wants to sell their house right now on the market. So is that correlated together? Just kind of like me brainstorming that. I don't know, Tyler, I can't imagine where you're at, where you do marketing at it. You probably see the same thing.
It's way less, and what we're seeing still is a disconnect between what prices were in Boise like a year ago to what we can do now, because Boise's had like a more like measurable drop than like where I live in SoCal. So it's hard to get people on the same page. But yeah, the response rate too, and my mailing list is much smaller. So I only mail to people who are delinquent on their property taxes. So that's the only list that I do. And it's just because, to your point, like I don't have the bandwidth and I don't have really anybody I have one person who's answering the phone on my team. I don't want to deal with the additional headache of a larger list. So it's just the tax delinquent. So I want to say my list is like 5,000. So it's a lot less than yours. Oh, wow. So yeah, it's a lot less. So before you did 30, how many were you mailing to?
I put it on my credit card because I was like, you know what, if I'm going to do it, I'm just going to go all out. And I just spread it out over like, I think the first list was 10,000. Then I went up to 36,000 over 2 months. And then I basically try and hit it every other month. So try and just cycle the same lists every other month. So it's not like it's a 10 million people list.
The cost of letters and such like that, like, is that affecting y'all's marketing at all? Because obviously when we were kids, like a stamp was like 10 cents and now, it's like 30 plus an envelope plus printers and stuff like that. Do you guys take that into account at all?
I don't. And well, just because I feel like it's more cost per deal. So that's like, I was like curious, like Dylan, and maybe this is the way we can answer is, how many deals have you got off the mail this year?
10.
You said 10, and we're in April, right? So you've mailed 4 times so far? Or 3 times?
Yes.
So about 120 mailers.
Yeah, 120,000 mailers. But do you know what your average profit is per deal?
Tough to say because some of them are flips haven't sold.
Okay, but like, well, I guess, do you get a 2x on your marketing for mail, a 3x, a 4x?
You know what? That's a good question. I have to actually calculate this for my last mailing. I was at like an 8x. So it was like
that was what I was trying to get at. Okay, yeah, there we go. Perfect.
It definitely made sense. Now, as far as cost is concerned, like these big mail houses, I'm out the door at 41 cents a postcard. There's a company out of Maine. They're not even online. So it's just a referral. And then the guy was like, sure, we'll work with you. And so it just made sense. Being East Coast, they'd send the mail out, it drops next day, just much quicker than, I love the Yellow Letters HQ, but it's all the way across the country.
Across the country, yeah. So I think, Aaron, like to your point, it does matter, but like I think like what's crazy is we look at like this small increase on the front end and people are like, oh no, it's going to get more expensive. But dude, 8x, I mean, that's like going to Vegas, baby. Like I'll take those numbers all day long. And then, so like I calculate everything that way, right? So I look at it, I'm like 8x, right? So I could legitimately spend money for 8 months, not get one deal, get one deal and break even. Anything after that, it's all money in the bank. And that's dude, 8x. So like and I like that you said that you put it on your credit card, because like you put it on your credit card and it sounds a little crazy for some people who are like, oh, that's kind of risky, but it's because what your return on your investment is already. So okay, this is a risk, but it's a calculated risk, and I know what my return on my investment is, so I'm going to increase it, and I'm going to most likely get that same yield, right? I mean, is that why you did it?
Yeah, and for those that are listening that maybe haven't had that want to start, I think, and I'm going to circle back to when I first sent mailers out back in 2014. I was like nervous to answer the phone. People said things and I was just like, oh, okay, great. Like I couldn't close the door. If the guy said I wanted to sell my house for $1, I'd have been like I wouldn't know what to do. So part of it is getting better at this whole sales process from, point A, from when you talk to them, so when you're there at the appointment and on the phone, everything in between. So that's a big part of like why I'm comfortable spending, $10,000-$15,000 a month just in direct mail, is because of that. It's, you just know, I'm like, look, if I talk to somebody, I, number one, know if they're a real lead. Number two, we've got our whole qualification process. It sounds complicated. It's very simple. And we go on the appointment and close the deal. So it's, part of it is salesy, but it's, and when you're spending that kind of money, it makes sense to invest in sales training.
So for anybody listening, this is kind of how I break it down. Is when I look at it, is like if I'm spending, we'll say round numbers, $1,000 a month, I know I'm spending $12,000 a year. If I get one deal off of that $12,000 a year that I make $12,000 on, then it's a break even. But if I get two deals, then I'm doubling my money. And if I'm quadrupling and whatever else, so it's just it's a play on your money. Like, what kind of return are you getting on your money? And if you do get the deals in front of you, are you able to close them? To Dylan's point, can you close the deal? Is it going to make sense, or are you going to be greedy, or are you not going to get enough? You're going to get stuck with the deal, have to cancel the contract. So you get to have an idea and have basically a calculation of what can I get into the deal, what kind of return can I get, what can I sell the deal for, and what makes the most sense for me to do with it. Is going to be wholesale, rental, flip, whatever it might be. So it's a series of calculated choices, but it's all educated guesses for the best part. But there's enough data out there where you can put this data together and be like, okay, if I buy it for $10,000, I can sell it for $20,000. I double my money. If I decide to wholesale it to sell somebody else for $30,000, now I've made even more money. So anybody listening, is you have to target the audience that you're trying to buy. And Tyler just mentioned that he's focusing on tax delinquent liens. So, or tax delinquent deeds, whatever the state he's looking at. So in Maryland, I know in my county, I have a tax delinquent lien auction coming up in about a month. And for me to get on the auction list, or to get to the auction list, it's $150 for me to buy into being able to auction it. So, but it gives me a list of, probably 2,000 or 3,000 properties that I can now market to, that I know are having a hard time with finances and might be more willing to sell. Or it might be, what are some other reasons, guys? Like, obviously divorce, probate. What else do you guys market to?
I was going to say some guys do burnouts. I've always done tax delinquent. You can do notice of defaults, notice of trustee sales, divorce. Trying to think of what else as far as motivation goes.
HOA delinquencies.
Oh yeah, and water shut off too. So I was able to. I really nerded out a couple years ago and figured out that when the water companies, when you're so far past due, they record something against the property. So I figured out how to research it on the recorder's office, and then I scraped the data, and then I took that data that I scraped and I created a mailing list, and then we mailed to them too, which is also a good one. I don't know, Dylan, do you have any others that we haven't mentioned? I'm trying to think of like.
So I used to look for these pain points to mail to, and at one point I had to get a tax delinquent list, and they were really hard to get. I had to mail the county, have my virtual assistant scrub the list and make it formatable, and I sent out 1,500 mailers, and we got 9 deals from it. And it was amazing because that ROI is, cost me $500 and made like 60 grand. So great ROI. I mailed that list again and got 0 calls, 0 anything. And I said, you know what? Let me just mail to everyone that's got equity, or maybe there's another list called unknown equity. Let me just mail to anyone that can sell their house, that has the ability, doesn't know too much. And it's just more of a machine gun approach. And I still get the same behind on their taxes, their water bill. Well, water bill, yeah. There's a lien. There's probate. They inherited it. The house is really beat up. They're a hoarder. There's a bunch of those reasons. I mean, it's I would say there's not one more than another, but it's kind of all spread out, at least right now.
I'll tell you a quick story. I was at a Baltimore meetup group, and I met a guy. This is a decade or two ago, And every year in Baltimore, the tax delinquent sale will come out, and it's like the size of a Bible. It's super thick. So he would send out teams for each like neighborhood. So he would have a checklist of saying, okay, does it have a roof? Does it have walls? Does it have windows? Does it have doors? Is it burned out? Are the people living there? Are there squatters? Does it have alley access? And a couple other like points on there. And he would go through this entire checklist and be like, okay, I'll either market to them to try to buy the house off delinquency, or I'll try to buy it at the tax lien sale or tax deed sale. And then he had a partnership with one of the auctioneer groups where if he did buy it for $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, he would then auction it off if he didn't want it, couldn't wholesale it, and couldn't flip it to the auctioneer for a minimum bid of 5, 10, whatever he had into it. But I mean, Baltimore, just like when you were in Philly, it's a very, it's 20 foot wide, 30 or 40 feet deep, 2 or 3 stories. And it's just cookie cutter, repeat. And in DC, when I was younger, it was very much block by block. Then it became neighborhood by neighborhood. And now it's like section of the city by section of the city. So you kind of know what things are going to sell for in the back end or wholesale in the back end. I thought it was very interesting that he still does this to this day, and he's become a multimillionaire with his little niche in the market and how he does this. I think it's a genius move.
That seems like a great move. He just found one niche and created some processes behind it, it sounds like, and then just was able to scale it up to a full team. And it sounds amazing. That's a great little strategy there. And
it also saves you from walking around the streets of Baltimore in the hood.
That's a good point.
Probably much safer. Increase your life expectancy.
When you guys were talking, I pulled up. There's a couple websites in the group that I posted. This was back in December of 21. I posted it. There's different like websites you can look at some of these data points that these guys have brought up. It's like PropStream, My REO Pro, Super Empower, Leading In Pros, Propelio, List Source. There's a bunch of different sources where you can find these pain points to market to if you want to. They're obviously pay to play, but anybody listening, like these are actionable items that you can do if you want to try to market to a certain demographic of people, like divorce, death, dismemberment, can't pay water bill, whatever it might be. Your county might have it. Your county might need to go do some FaceTime with people that are at the properties. I know in College Park, Maryland, where I live at, I used to go down to the city hall and just say, hey, can you give me a list of everybody who has, high grass and have been fined for it? So I knew right then it's probably around, or they're not taking care of it, or it's a vacancy. And this is actually when I was doing landscaping, because then I can go to them and say, hey, I want to market to you to cut your grass. Then it used the same exact concept to do real estate investing. And then I learned, obviously later on, you can skip trace them. You can do, my Fast People Search, I think it is, or Fast People Search. That's a free one out there where you can just look them up and say, here's the address, here's the name, here's the phone number, here's who's they're related to, and you can kind of do your own investigative work to find out who these people are and how to get a hold of them. So it's a couple more like moving parts, but this is kind of the transition that I went through when I was younger to market to people, whether it be to cut their grass or buy their house. So
better ROI now buying houses than cutting grass, I'd imagine.
Yeah. And you talk to the mailman, talk to the landscape guys, and be like, who here is in trouble? Like, can you buy? I'll pay you a finder's fee if you bring houses to me that I can close the deal on. Just get your network out there. That's a great idea. Absolutely. Now, what are you working on now? You said you have a 39 unit deal that you're working on now. Is it a bunch of houses? Is it an apartment complex? What exactly is that? For sure. So, friends of mine were like, hey, what do you think about this deal? We don't really want it. And I was like, well, if you guys don't want it, I'm gonna reach out to them. They were like, sure, no problem. I didn't want to go behind their back. It's 39 houses, modular built, on 75 acres. It's got a lake. It's a really cool setup, but it's complicated when it comes to getting financing behind it. It's like there's 27 acres with 10 houses. There's another one that's like 5. There's a couple with 3 and 2, and then one has a trailer. So it's been, and 39 septic systems where, I don't know, Aaron, it's like that where you're at, but it's like 25, 30 G's of septic. So we're spending $15,000 on inspections right now, just on that. But, we're getting a great deal. It's, we're buying them all for 2.835. And I think we're going to
I don't know if we're going to keep them or subdivide them. I think it's worth like 6 to 8 once we're done with them. But it's a complicated deal, but the opportunity's there. It's worth the time invested into it, if that makes sense.
Well, and septic scare me because you can get it inspected and it could still fail. I've done it before. I'm in a public water, public sewer area. I'm in DC, so you got to go a little bit far out to get public or well and septic. But I've done it before, and it's like, what kind of septic is it? What's wrong with it? Is it a mound system? Is it a tubular system? Is it a holding tank? And like, it's just something else you need to learn about. And the cost to replace is going to be different for each one. Like, we don't do sand mounds here in Maryland, but they're big in Pennsylvania. And there's different costs associated with them. So my hat's off. I mean, you're basically figuring out the pain points of these people, and you're saying, I'll figure it out, but I'm going to get paid on the back end because I figured out how to mitigate these potential issues. So I was looking at one RV park in Delaware last week, and it was 10 units or 12 units, and it was on like 5 different septic systems and shared wells. And I was like, I just can't do it. I can't. It's just too much.
Complicated. I mean, and when it comes to single family, like, a lot of people don't want to touch the septic systems, and it's like, I'll just budget $30,000 for a septic. And sometimes we're a little under, sometimes a little over. And, once we figure out the process of like getting an engineer, getting approvals, getting the company out there, the process it takes, the inspections, like, it sounds like a lot, but like, we've done it enough to where it's like, okay, it's still a headache, but like, we know what we're dealing with. So hasn't really bitten us yet. I know Mike and Bill had a situation before where they couldn't even get a septic system on their property a couple years ago. So I haven't had that happen yet, but I try and take precautions from what I know on how to handle that. But there's, I think, a lot of money to be made in these, like where I'm at in South Jersey, it can be really rural. And I think people shy away from them, but that's probably some of our best deals we've done have been.
I was just going to say
properties.
It's like outside of Boise in like really small towns, I've made my biggest profits because nobody really wants to go out there. There's not the volume, but I've made really good money. And there's a town called, well, I'm not going to say the town actually.
Keep that in my back pocket.
Yeah, I was going to say, I haven't done a ton of deals there, but man, I mean, they're like 2 or 3 flips for me in Boise, which is rad. And so I was thinking of something when you guys were talking too, and this is kind of a good point for people that are learning, right? So Aaron said that he doesn't like septic and well. I don't blame him. I'm not really a big fan either, especially in Southern California growing up here. That was like never anything that we ever had to deal with. And then it made me think of Boise. There's certain spots in like the Treasure Valley where I think there's been so much pressure put on the water tables because it's expanded so fast. I think some of their wells are actually drying up. So that was interesting for me. But more importantly, so the septic, right? I'm not a fan. Dylan, it doesn't bother him, but this is what I was thinking when he said that. We get these inspections, right? When we're buying these flip properties, you're paying for somebody to come out and inspect the septic. I don't personally do it because I'm not in Boise, but my acquisitions manager goes out there with them. You're paying somebody $400 or $500 to do an inspection. Ask them questions. What do you look for, and what should I be looking for? How would I know X, Y, and Z? Use their knowledge so when you go to the next appointment and you find out that there's a problem with the septic, you have that advantage over the next person. And like Dylan's saying, right, he's now comfortable with it because he's done enough of them, and people do not want to do them. Like Aaron and myself probably wouldn't want to be the ones that do it. But you've now identified a niche that other people do not want to do. You know that you've paid for enough inspections. You have this expert here to where sometimes, and I would not take advantage of this. Hey, Bob, can you go look at this property real quick for me? I think the septic's failed, whatever, and let me know real quick. And then if I get the house under contract, I'll pay you for the inspection. Or if we have to replace the septic, you're the guy I will use, and obviously be a man of your word to use that person. But there's ways you can do it. And I have a buddy out here in SoCal who has his own niche, and I don't ever want to do it. He does a lot of modular and manufacturers, and he's good enough to put them where they're not on foundations, and he does really well. And I'm like, dude, if I were you, it's definitely, again, it goes to that sexiness factor. You're not going to see this on HGTV. Hey, look at me, I'm Tyler. I'm the guy who takes modular homes or manufactured homes and puts them on foundation. But I'll tell you what, the paychecks are very sexy.
Hey, man, money's money.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, like Dylan, I'm thinking, okay, well, you said, right, there's a couple $1 million spread. I'm sure you're going to earn every penny of it because there's a lot of hair on the deal. The financing is going to be something that you have to work through, the septic, all of these things, but the money's there. And if you take the calculated risk, hey, why not? I don't know. Are you going to, is this like a whole community that's going to be like a private community? How is that makeup?
It's the middle of nowhere. And the
Okay.
guy was a judge, and he just kept putting houses up when he was a judge of the county.
Okay.
And now he's like 85 years old, lives in Miami, and he's going to sell them. So
Okay.
it's kind of its own community, but there's even more hair on it. I'm not even going to get into super into the weeds, but it's a complicated deal. But like you said, there was other offers, and no one really wanted to go through with it. And I'm like, oh, fine, I'll deal with it. So it just comes down to figuring it out, doing the best you can.
Is this in Jersey?
It is, yeah, it is.
Okay. So I had this is completely off topic, but quick story. I had a church under contract. I'm known to buy very random stuff. So I had this church from the 1700s under contract, and I had the schoolhouse, which was from I think the 1800s under contract. And the church probably sat about 150 people, and the schoolhouse was probably for 50 kids. And the septic on the property was only rated for 2 people. So I asked the county if I could expand it, and they said no because it's historic property. I was like, well, then what are my options? And they're like, well, if it's only for 2 people, you have to make it residential. And I was like, well, what does that look like? And they're like, well, you have to pay the impact fees to make it from church to residential, and which was like $40,000. I was like, so I have to buy the deal. I have to basically leave the septic as it is, can't expand it, make it residential, and I can only put 2 people on a 150 person and a 50 schoolhouse property. They said, yeah. I was like, this deal makes no sense no matter how I look at it. But like, were there options? No, there weren't. There was 0 options because I couldn't do a sand mound. I couldn't do a big septic field. I couldn't do an expansion. So like, when you look into these deals, anybody who's listening, you just got to know like, what am I allowed to do in this property? Because like, I'll never touch a cesspool. I'll do a septic. I'll do well. If the deal made sense, I would definitely do it. But like, there's certain things I just will not touch, like a cesspool or like a holding tank is fine because you can pump out a holding tank. It's just what your comfort level and know it going into your acquisition is. You should expect to potentially have these problems because of this deal. So, yeah.
And don't stray from that either. And don't stray from that either. I mean, if it's it's something you don't want to do, don't get blinded by a big paycheck and get yourself into trouble. I know even Dylan asked me if I wanted to lend on a log cabin. You remember that thing?
I still own it.
There you go. And I'm like, dude, I'm like, it could be a good deal. I have no idea. I do not understand log cabins. I'm in Southern California. Everything's stucco and built after. So for me, it wasn't a deal, but I mean,
Mike lent on it. Mike actually lent me money on it.
Nice.
We paid him back, and like we're getting destroyed on it. But I was gonna mention, because you brought up a good point. Like, if you're doing deals, like, it's a really good idea to have a buy box of what you do. And I think what happened pre-April was when we bought that property last year, is that you could sell anything for practically whatever you wanted.
Yes.
So I just made the mistake of buying a couple places that we shouldn't have bought. And, now we're feeling the repercussions of it, but part of the game. And you learn as you lose money.
Can't win them all. Yeah.
Hey, Dylan, let me ask you a question. When I looked into buying log homes, because obviously we're both East Coast, there's a lot of them around us. One of the obstacles I ran into was getting insurance on it because it is a log home. Now, it was for a number of reasons, because the insulation, how it was built, when it was built, potential risk of fire, flood, damage, termites, whatever it might be. Like, what obstacles did you face? And you mentioned that you're taking a beating on it. Like, why? What's the issue?
It's everything that could have gone wrong. Legitimately, everything that could have gone wrong went wrong.
Did it have septic?
We had to convert it to public sewer. That came in at $10,000 more than we were quoted. Had to put a well on the property. It was a $16,000 well. We had to reframe the entire subfloor. The HVAC system ended up being like, that was when we were used to pricing of HVAC being here, and now it's here. So my $7,000 quote that's now $13,000, sucks.
So your budget just got blown out of the water because of, I'm guessing, COVID.
It's like literally everything that went wrong could have gone wrong. But it's I didn't really find any differences with it. Like, somebody wants to take my money for insurance one way or another, so I could just call enough insurance guys. Somebody will figure something out, which is usually what we end up doing. So, you run into these issues, but if you're paying somebody to do something, it may cost a little bit more, but they'll get it done.
Okay. All right. So again, back to the buy box, like know what you're getting into. Like I know I'll probably never, I love the idea of a log cabin house. I think they look fantastic. They're cool.
Yes.
But like there's hardy board out there now that looks like logs. There's concrete out there that looks like logs. There's a lot of other options where it's not actually a log. That's a whole nother story though. Have you guys looked at doing development at all anywhere, Tyler or Dylan, or both of you guys?
No, because I'm not. So like to that point, I just not my strong suit. I've been getting some properties that have larger like areas of land. I think at this point, if I wanted to do it, I would just partner with somebody who I know is successful doing development in the city that I want to do it in, and and figure out a profit share. That would cause so much brain damage for me personally to learn how to do it. I think I used to I would normally I don't know what, 10 years ago, I'd be like, oh, I'm taking this on. I'm going to figure this out. Nobody's going to tell me I can't do something. And now I'm like, oh, I'll just find a developer and split the profit with them, or figure out, or even wholesale it to them at some point. I don't know about Dylan, but.
So I think from my own experience, when I don't have enough opportunities, not enough leads, not enough deals, I try and make everything fit into a box. And it's just, whenever I've done that is when we lose money. When I bought that log cabin, knew I shouldn't have really bought it, but I was like, we got about 160 grand spread. And now that we're 220,000 into it, it hurts. But it's because it didn't fit in the square peg round hole, whatever you want to say. But like, when you have a lot of opportunities, you're not going to look at like some random one's going to take up a ton of your time and try and do it, because you're like, why am I going to waste my time? That's why I don't do the wraps. I know there's money in it. I just don't feel like figuring it out, to put the systems in place and doing all that. So the development stuff, I was going to say, if I know a guy that I would call if I wanted to do it, because I've had some chances and I just never pulled the trigger.
I had a meeting, just a short meeting last weekend with a county in Delaware about development, and I was like, "This is what I'm looking at doing. I retire in a couple of years. What does this look like?" And he's like, "You'll have to buy the land and sit on it, because we're not even having council member hearings for 12 months to see if we'll allow you to do that or not." I was like, "So that sounds like a terrible idea. Buy land, sit on it, and hope that you guys will tell me I can or can't develop it." Got it. So that's out the window for now. So, and every county and every jurisdiction is going to be different. Sometimes it's a town manager who's like, "Yep, all this on the box," and the other ones it's like you have to have council meetings, and you have to have all the tests run for the soil samples, and you run the utilities. And one of my properties, I was looking at subdividing a parcel of land off and doing another house on it, and they're like, "We get to do curb cuts and sidewalks," and I'm like, "There's not a sidewalk in this entire community. Why would I have to do curb cuts and sidewalks?" Like, "Oh, that's the new compounding, or the new rules for developing here." I was like, "So there's going to be 150-foot run of sidewalk in this whole entire neighborhood?" Like, yeah. Dude. I was like, "And I can't get a variance?" They're like, "No." I was like, "This is stupid."
That same town that I said I made a lot of money in, it's funny, Aaron. So every time, it's interesting. Now that when we sell them, I forget I have to sign something, and I'm like, well, I don't care. I'm not going to own the house that long. But when I buy it, it's like you agree to pay X amount of money every year or something to that effect for a sidewalk fund, because it's not there yet. Yeah, I'm dead serious, dude. Like, I wish I could remember what it was called, but you have to put money in, contribute money towards this. So when they do find the need, the money's already been allocated, because this town is small, right? But with the overflow from Boise, it started to grow. But yeah, I've had to 2 times now. I've had to contribute money to their sidewalk fund.
So sidewalk funds in Boise and rain tax in California. It's awesome.
It's so crazy. I was like, and I partnered with somebody on that. He's like, "Are you kidding me?" I'm like, "No, dude, I'll send," because we were partners on the deal. I'm like, "I'll send you over the info so you can read it yourself." This is the funniest thing I've ever heard of. But they're
I need money for a sidewalk that we're not sure we're going to build.
Exactly, 100%. It sounds like California more than Idaho, to be honest.
I was going to say that, but
dude, well, it was. I'm like, what the heck? It's so interesting. Well, and so like Dylan, you mentioned something as far as like who you would do for development, and it kind of I think comes down to after you invest for a while. Aaron's been investing for a long time too, and we talked about this. It comes down to like at this point in my career, what am I willing to do and what am I not willing to do? And granted, you're still younger than Aaron and I, but I think you've been doing this long enough to where you kind of know. And now, from what I've seen on social media and talking to you, it's like you have a lifestyle. I know you guys went traveling and stuff like that, to where wholesaling to me, like at your age and like with what you've done already, like I would wholesale. Because you can go travel, you can go do all these things, and your headaches for a wholesale deal are like this compared to this. And you don't have any kids yet that I'm aware of. Dude, I would take advantage of
Him
that
either,
lifestyle.
apparently.
Huh?
I said he's not aware of me either, apparently.
He's like, I don't think so. But like you guys, I mean, dude, wholesaling, rentals, and then traveling. I mean, if I had to do it over again, or if I was your age, I would 100% stick with that as long as possible and not get a ton of headaches. Unless, like you said, that one that you did is going to be a good payoff or a good payday, and that's worth it. But have you found that since you've moved and made it virtual, have you been kind of leaning more towards, okay, I do want to do this so I can go do all the things I want to do?
So the cool thing is being 100% virtual. Like we went to the Redwoods last month. We're going to Hawaii next month. Then we're going to Iceland and Chicago. So I can do all these things and still work. Like you spend the first 3 hours of the morning working. So it's pretty cool. But I think being virtual allows me to not do all the little menial tasks of like, I'll drive 40 minutes to put the lockbox on. Don't worry about it. I have to rely on everybody else. And it's very frustrating sometimes. But now I can spend time, we call it revenue generating activities of making the calls I need to make, talk to my referral partners, that sort of thing. So it's better use of time when I'm like forced not to be there and handle all the dumb BS that we have to deal with, if that makes sense.
100%.
So here, Dylan, I don't know how old you are. I'm not even going to guess, but just from my experience, so I've driven cross country in probably a dozen and a half countries in the world, and I've traveled to a lot more than that. So like I got engaged in Galway. I drove cross country in Iceland. You just mentioned that. I've driven cross country in Ireland twice. I've been to driven cross country in 2 countries in Africa. And like if I could go back, I would never change that, because the experience and the outlook it gave me was something that you can't get unless you go there and experience it. So if I were to trade more money or more experiences, I would always look back at my life and be like, I want more experiences. That's worth it to me. So anybody listening, if you've never traveled outside the country, outside the world, like it's definitely not what they portray in the media. There's definitely a lot more nuances that you'll never understand unless you actually show up there. So
100%. We did a month for my honeymoon in Italy, and
nice.
It was having the business try and run by itself. You learn a lot too, but it's again, there was problems, but whatever, screw it. Well, I had the experience of being in Italy for a month and
that's legit.
And all that.
So did you have any predetermined notions or expectations what Italy was going to be, and then what it was actually?
Yeah, we walked. So we did like Greece and Italy, and I walked over 200 miles in the month we were there. So it was a little more walking than I expected. I didn't expect to walk that far.
A lot of hills.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So like, did you have any like preconceived notions of what it was going to be like your experience there versus like what you experienced? Like, was it what you expected or not?
No, I didn't really know what to expect. Europe is completely different. Actually, yeah, they say Europe is different than I expected. I didn't really know what to expect, but it's definitely different than you really hear about, I should say. Yeah,
every country I've ever been to, like I had in my head what the news and the media and whatever Instagram will show you what it is, and then when you get there, it's like, this is not what I expected. Like, it's just different. And if you don't ever go to these places, going to Europe, you can hit a whole bunch of countries in a week, but in the U.S., you can do just a couple states in the week. But even in the U.S., like California is starkly different, whether it be fire department or scenery, than D.C., Maryland, Virginia, Jersey, New York. Like, it's just 2 different worlds with 2 different personalities. So if anybody who's listening, I invest a lot in my time for experiences, and I will never be the richest man in the room just because I'd rather spend the money on experiences. So my hat's off to you for taking the time and going other places in the world. I think it's awesome that you do that.
No, same to you. That's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome.
Nice.
Tyler likes to go to Hawaii. Hawaii is California's like Aruba, Bahamas.
Yep, for sure.
Everybody on the East Coast wants to go to Hawaii. Everybody on the West Coast wants to go to like Bahamas, Aruba,
Jamaica. Yeah, when we were in Jamaica, we were like the only guys from California there. I'm like, oh, this is funny. And they're like, well, this is like our Hawaii. It's a lot faster. I love Hawaii. I mean, dude, I like traveling too, like Aaron said. And I always laugh because I get so much more productive when I go on vacation, which is obviously not the intent of vacations. But I will get up early, especially in Hawaii, and I'll crank out 3-4 hours of work before, everybody's ready to roll. And then go enjoy the rest of the day. Cause I don't know, man. I love to travel. And I always find that I'm the most productive in areas like that. It cracks me up every time I go to Hawaii. I'm like, dude, I'm working too much, but I get so much done in such a small amount of time. But I think it also highlights, if I know I only have 2 hours to do things, I get so much more done than if I was farting around the house all day, because I can just expand that into an 8-hour workday. Whereas in there, it's like, okay, I got 2 hours to get all of this done, and then I have to leave.
Absolutely.
I'm super productive.
Same thing.
On the plane is when I'm the most productive, because I'm like, what else am I going to do? I'm stuck right here in this 18-inch seat that my wide ass doesn't fit in. What else can I do? So I'll just read, and that's why I'm most productive.
Nice. Well, Dylan, we're coming up on an hour right now. Do you have, we've kind of gone all over the map, as is per our usual. Do you have anything that you want to discuss in the last couple of minutes? Kind of let us know what you, well, how about this? What are your plans in the future for your real estate investing? Kind of keep the way it is. Do you have any grand goals as far as like a unit number, or do you want to transition to anything?
Yeah. I mean, I tried doing storage before. I think I called every self-storage owner within like 500 miles of where I lived in Jersey. Love to get into self-storage, but at the same time, I look at the boring work. I'm like, all right, if I can buy 38 properties or 38 doors every 2 years, in 10 years, that's a lot. That's, I don't know, 140 doors or something, or 170 doors. And it should be great. So it's trying to keep the eye on the ball and just doing something very boring and basic and just repeat it. And then eventually trying to add in the self-storage model, which it seems like in the East Coast, it's all majorities owned by, there's a couple companies that own most of them. So that's pretty much the goal right there. Just stay the boring path, just buy more and more rentals and small multifamilies mainly.
Nice. Well, always remember, the boring path got you to go to Italy for a month, so it's obviously working.
100%. You're not kidding.
But I mean, plus, like, if it doesn't fit, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Like, a lot of people are during COVID times, people were selling stuff for stupid money that just doesn't work. Even today, people are house poor. So, like, I'm the same boat. Like, I've been looking at storage for the last couple of years. I'm like, I can't figure out how to make this work where I'm super conservative, but my numbers, I'm like, I can't figure out how to make it work for me where the numbers make sense. So I'm with you. I'd rather develop it and build it myself, because that, to me, I would know my exact numbers and what the demand is. But I'm with you, D. As we wrap this up, let me ask you a couple of questions. If you can go back and give your younger self advice, and this could be your teenage self, your 20s self, whatever age, after high school when you were putting flyers on Philly doors, like, what advice would you give yourself?
I guess I could have started earlier, but to take maybe something a little more actionable, it's like when I started buying rentals, I was buying them with no reserves, no money. So it's like I had 2 years of like 11 vacancies because they couldn't afford to fix them up. Now they're finally getting fixed up. So like when I first started, I'd rather just make cash first and pay the taxes on it, and then eventually go back into rentals. That's kind of like the only thing I'd really switch is instead of buying rentals in the beginning, just focus on stacking cash.
Okay, good. And the second question is, what's your why? Like, why are you still pushing to do more? Why are you pushing to do bigger deals? Why are you still investing in doing what you're doing?
I think the beginning, though, to me, my why has changed. It was like I started at zero, and now, how do I turn myself into something? And now it's more of, I enjoy doing it. I enjoy the game. I enjoy looking at the numbers and saying, wow, I've really improved. I think it's the enjoyment of the actual business itself is more the why than anything. Nice.
That's one thing. I was having a conversation with my wife a couple of days ago, is I've got 1031 money from a sale from one property I was flipping. And I've looked at so much real estate. I'm so overwhelmed right now with my 45. Well, now I have Now I've got 33 days left, and like I'm under the gun to find a place to put this money. And I'm like, this is the first time in my life where I don't enjoy looking at real estate. She's like, then don't. I was like, no, because I enjoy paying Uncle Sam a lot less than I do doing this, and that's my why is I don't want to give Uncle Sam money.
100%. 100%.
So Tyler, do you got anything else before we wrap this up?
No, man. Thank you for coming on the show, Dylan. It's definitely been good to catch up. And
Sure.
yeah, that's it. It's I love it. I just want to say for people that are listening too, it's like I like the fact that Dylan's mentioned things very subtly that most people won't do, that have allowed him to succeed. He's done cold calling, he's done door knocking, he's put things on people's doors. And I think a lot of that, I mean, from what I know of him outside of this interview, is he's pushing. And I think that's a huge reason for his success. So thanks for being on the show, man.
No, I appreciate
Dylan,
it. I appreciate you guys having me.
If anybody wants to get a hold of you, how would they go about doing that?
Instagram's probably easiest. It's at Dylan Burnett _1. That's my Instagram. That's probably the easiest way to get hold of me.
All right, I'm putting that in the show notes. All right, buddy. Thank you for coming on and chatting with us for an hour, and look forward to seeing how this 39 property thing works out.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks again for spending some time with us today. If you found value in anything you heard, please share with someone who may benefit. We look forward to connecting between shows in our Facebook group, First Responder Financial Freedom. Till next time.